What's up, everybody, and welcome back to Laying the Points with Farley Bets. My name is Chris R. Farley, aka at Farley Bets on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. And we are putting out a lot more content, a lot of free picks on TikTok. So check me out over there. Also, a lot of free picks and a lot of content at farleybets.com. Go over to farleybets.com and sign up for our free plays. You can get them directly to your inbox every single day, or most days. Can't give out free picks every day, but most days we do, which is more than you can say for a lot of handicappers, especially handicappers giving out premium picks like I do. A lot of premium information in those posts and in those emails. So sign up at farleybets.com. 57% career NBA bettor up until this season, which we're about to get to, believe me. But we have a fantastic show for you today. At Ron Ace Sports joins Laying the Points. I respect Ron so much. He has a ton of experience evaluating NFL teams before the season starts, evaluating and assessing the NFL draft. He's so thorough, so comprehensive, and so sharp in the way that he thinks. And it's just always great having him on the show and talking to him about the NFL. And we're talking NFL, which is exciting, right? It's almost the end of, well, I guess not. I guess it's like almost mid-May, but it feels like after the NFL draft, here we go, right? Here comes training camp, and before we know it, preseason is here. So let's start talking NFL, baby. Schedule release Thursday, by the way, tomorrow. So that's exciting. Okay, I got to sound off really quick. First of all, thank you for listening to Laying the Points. If you're a new listener, new subscriber, thank you so much. I think you're going to enjoy it. We tell it like it is here. We talk sports betting philosophies and strategies. And of course, we give away free picks on the show as well. A lot of great guests, just like today's guest. So thank you for joining. 5th place, 2021 Circa winner and pro bettor Chris Farley here. And I got to sound off because the Boston Celtics last night really send me into a little tailspin because I'm human, right? And I haven't had the best NBA season. And I could probably blame a lot of things on that, right? Like, I've had a tough year. My best bud, who I used to be in Circa with, we're not friends anymore, kind of had a falling out. That fucking sucked. And that was at the start of the NFL season, when we used to do a podcast together, right? Laying the Points. He used to be on here for the NFL shows. Of course, my wife has been pregnant for the entire NFL season and most of the NBA season. And of course, our little girl was just born, which I'm incredibly grateful for. But life has been busy. So I'm probably around 52 to 53% this year. And I've heard from a lot of the wise guys, those sharp bettors who have been around for a long time. I've heard from them that this happens, right? You just have a year off every now and then. But, first of all, I didn't think I was going to have a year off ever, because hitting 57% in the NBA over 3 seasons is pretty crazy. And that's what we did. A lot of units won, over 150 units won. But this year, just things in the NFL and the NBA felt different, changing of the guard in a lot of ways, more parity. And really the pinnacle of that, the quintessential example for my season was last night, man, betting on those Boston Celtics. The way they started that game, how porous their defense looked. They showed absolutely no sense of chemistry for long stretches. Like, if Philly ever punched back, they just got deflated every time. Jaylen Brown just completely disappeared. Jason Tatum played great in the second half. For most of the game, he played pretty good. Second half especially. Trying to hold the team on his back. But it just looked like the team was in discord, right? They weren't together. And as a sports bettor who, like, the mental toll is rough, guys, with things like this. Like, I have premium customers who pay for my fucking picks. And I'm telling them to put their hard-earned money. These are husbands, these are wives. Put their hard-earned money on this bet. I believe in it. 2 units. Celtics at home. Game 5. Revenge spot after an emotional OT loss. back at home, knowing they're the better team. They've been here before, NBA Finals last season, Boston Celtics. And what happened, right? It's like when the NBA and when sports are this unpredictable, it takes a toll. And I was already planning on doing it, but we're definitely doing it now. My wife, clinical psychologist, Dr. Kate, is going to be back on Laying the Points probably next week. And we're going to revisit some of this stuff because last year I had her on. A lot of people received it well. And we talk about the mental toll and struggles of sports betting. And it probably should be talked about more. And if you're a pro sports bettor, I feel you. Like, it ain't going to always go well. And then you have people out there who, know-it-alls, of course, right? The vitriol, the comments you can get thrown at you is terrible. Terrible. But then when you're winning, there's like a few people clapping for you and that's it. Isn't that amazing how that works? But it's tough. I mean, I got to face my premium customers after a loss like that and be like, hey, sorry about that. I have no fucking clue what happened, but sorry about that. Like that sucks. And last night was that was it, man. Like that was the cherry on top of a season. I can't wait till this season is over in the NBA. I mean, I'm going to bet it all the way through. I think we're going to finish strong. But man, oh man, what a crazy season in the NBA. And most of the sharpest handicappers I know of the NBA, we were all struggling for those first few months. All of us. On the Bet US show, we were struggling. And some of the sharper minds I know, I talked to them, struggling. Did a lot better in 2023, but still, this nonsense happens, man. Anyway, if you're a bettor out there who's recreational or pro bettor, my heart goes out to you for moments like that because I want people's hearts to go out to me in moments like that because it means a lot. Like I want to win. Our reputations are at stake when bullshit like that happens because overall you're still going to lose the units, right? Like you're still going to lose. So here we are, man. But like that was rough. Boston Celtics, fuck you. That's what I want to say to that team. I hope to God that they don't recover and like win the NBA Finals because they're annoying as shit. All right, then. Let's move on to talk NFL draft with Ron Ace Sports. He's the best. Check out Laying the Points every single week. Check out those promo codes at FarleyBets.com as well. I give you 125% bonus at BetUS. Forget about it. It's free money. Go get it. FarleyBets.com. Click on that link. Help support a brother, please. Hey, please. Especially after that loss last night. All right, let's get to Ron Ace Sports. He's the best. NFL draft, baby. All right, what's up, everybody, and welcome back to Laying the Points with Farley Bets. This is the very first NFL podcast of 2023 for me. At least I'm pretty sure it is. I don't think I've talked about the NFL at all, just NBA, just other sports so far. But now that the NFL draft is over, I'm already getting so excited about the start of the NFL season. NBA playoffs are winding down, and I have a fantastic guest for Laying the Points for this first episode to talk about the NFL after the draft. His name is Ron, at Ron Ace Sports. You can find him on Twitter. Always collaborating with great minds in the betting industry, Ron, especially when it comes to the NFL. And I'm going to let you speak to your experience, but I wanted to have you on the pod because especially when it comes to after the draft, evaluating these teams, evaluating the draft, I sincerely don't know anyone who does it more thoroughly or better than you, Ron. So welcome to Laying the Points. I don't know if you've been on Laying the Points before. I feel like you have just because we go back a few years now from Sports Wagering University. But welcome back or welcome for the first time. It's great to have you on, Ron.
Thanks, Chris. And I do love talking football with such knowledgeable people like yourself. And because it's a two-way thing. You learn something all the way through, whether it's giving out a play, whether it's talking about the process. And yes, I've had a lot of years of experience, not one, not two, not even 3 decades of experience. So it does put me up there. But like we were talking before the show, it's a repeatable process. It's something I learned from the very start. Is you do something, you tweak it when it needs tweaking, when the rules change, when you're finding something doesn't work. And the draft, like you said, you're getting excited now. It's it's getting to that piece of the puzzle. The puzzle is starting to get together. I mean, we talk about what happened at the end of last year. That's where I start. What were the key things, the takeaways, the good and the bad, the exit reports that I did that you were a part of? That's, diagnosing where the team is. What's the snapshot on July 15th or January 15th? Then you have the free agency. You have all the coaching changes. You have the coordinator changes. And now you have the draft. And the puzzle is really getting together. There's not really that much more to do. We have all the pieces now, with the exception of when every team is playing their rivals and so on and so forth. And we're going to have that piece in 36 hours or so. So Chris, this is the time to get excited about the NFL.
Yeah, you're so right. I actually forgot about that. Lot of stuff going on as always. NBA playoffs, betting baseball a little soccer too, Ron, believe it or not, just going for those value plays in soccer. But Thursday, right? Thursday is a schedule release. I know when I was a little boy, I used to look for that schedule release, and then I used to print it out. I used to put it on my bedroom wall of the New York Giants, of course, and just like, I think I would just look at it every day and like, oh, that's going to be a good game. That's going to be a good game, and the excitement hasn't left me yet, because now you can actually start to battle plan, right? We know who their opponents are going to be, but there's some situational things that come in mind. Obviously, Thursday games, maybe a short week, maybe back-to-back really tough teams to face. So I don't know. The schedule release to me still has like a mystifying element to it. Like, I get really excited. But let me ask you this, Ron, before we get into the draft, because this is something that I've been thinking about a lot since the end of last NFL season. I won fifth in Circa 2 years ago, blah, 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 Chris. But last season, not so good to me, Ron. I was like probably 52 or 53% at the end of it. I forget which one, well below my usual mark. But tell me if you agree with this, and, please disagree if you do, but don't you think that last season was kind of a changing of the guard in a lot of ways? Because I think I didn't adjust. Like, I didn't adjust quick enough to these newer teams that were showing a lot of grit. They were covering teams like the Seahawks. Now, of course, they kind of trailed off. But even teams like the Eagles, even with their easy schedule, I was looking for opportunities where they were going to regress. And then teams on the other end, like that were historically high performing, led by great quarterbacks like Aaron Rodgers and the Packers, Tampa Bay and Tom Brady, the Rams, obviously Stafford goes down. There was just a shifting, and it took me a long time to adjust, I think. And that really affected my handicapping. I think this year is going to be different, because I do think that we sort of know who these teams are a little better now. And then of course we have to kind of rediscover them after the draft and free agency a bit. But what do you think about that perspective? Like, was last year an anomaly a little bit more for you?
Boy, I have like 13 thoughts already. I could go in a number of directions there. The first thought that came to mind is, remember, if we're just talking the NFL, the sample size isn't ever going to be large. If you're betting 4 to 5 games a week, and you've got 80 games, 85 games or something like that, in a lot of circles, in the psychometric, in the handicapping, whatever, that's not a large sample size. And you could have variance, and it could look like an anomaly season when it really isn't. The other thing is, I think my work with the draft helped me get through a lot of different things regarding that, and made it kind of a really special season for me. First of all, every draft is different. And I know we're not quite getting into the draft, but it comes into play here because last year's draft, the 2022 draft, had 290 on my board, draft eligible players, which is crazy because usually it has about 230, 235. That's most years. So there were, because of the super seniors, because of the COVID and everything, we had an unbelievable quality draft. And there's usually a low positive correlation to draft success and success win totals and stuff, but it was a higher positive correlation when you saw how fast, you mentioned Seattle, how fast they just went crazy in terms of, you're talking about 6 new starters. The Jets, hit the draft like they'd never hit the draft before. Your Giants did very well in the draft. And all of a sudden, those correlations, because these were ready to go players, performed better than we thought there. And I think because I had studied the draft for so many years and I saw where they could fill potential holes and so on, maybe I felt good about where I was at the beginning of the year in terms of this. I felt like I was on an island saying that I didn't say Seattle would win the playoffs, but I said they would win 7 games and they're ready to go. I mean, they're going to be better than most people think. And luckily I was right about that. There's teams you're right on and there's teams you're wrong on. For example, I was wrong on Cincy in terms of how they were going to enter the season after just losing the Super Bowl and they barely made it and they had all these close wins. There would be some regression, the first place schedule. And so I had faded them. And then in the middle of the year, I could tell metric wise that I have to come off my position. This is a team based on what Baltimore was not doing and what Cincinnati was doing. That was actually a value play in the middle of the season, where at the beginning of the season, I would never have made that play. So it's a number of answers to your question, but it's sample size. It's looking at where their holes are, looking at how it goes. But the game is changing, Chris. You are right about that. The NFL wants more points. Traditionalists like me who used to love the 2017 scores, the 17-10 scores. I'm the only guy on the planet that loved the New England Ram game because the defense, Bill Belichick's defense, even with the rules, held all their playoff teams that they faced to 50% passing, which is impossible in this day and age. Yeah. I'm a traditionalist and I have to change because the game is changing because the rules are changing.
Yeah, I can relate to. So I have 13 things to say after you just said that. I can just relate to so much of what you're saying. Like, for example, the Bengals, I was saying the same thing. I mean, after a year like they had and, lack of protection for Joe Burrow, wasn't sure if that was really going to change much by the transactions that they made. And it really didn't change all that much, a little bit, but just a team with a lot of grit, right? A team with great leadership, players on defense always overperforming. Like, I'm looking at the Eagles as that team this year, but now I'm like, I'm just not going to be as bullish on like any takes that I have, because you do kind of have to wait to see how these teams come out. And a team like the Eagles, especially with the way that they draft, the way that they fill their holes or stack up, all their depth on their offensive and defensive lines, I think is a fantastic approach. And even though they have a really tough schedule this year, we're talking AFC West, AFC West, AFC East, NFC West. I'm getting, I got basketball in my Western Conference run. I'm all over the place. It's going to be a much harder schedule, but I don't think that means that they necessarily regress altogether. Anyway, a lot obviously that we still have to discover as we approach this season, but let's get to the NFL draft run. And I am going to approach this quite honestly, because my preparation for the NFL usually starts in June after the NBA finals are over. Sounds like I might want to revisit that process because, someone as sharp as you is already starting long before that. But I'm going to approach this from a very naive, the perspective. Okay. Because I from our audience's perspective and standpoint, I'm sure they all paid attention to the draft, maybe even bet on it. But how do these teams look afterwards? How do these players that they filled, are they going to matter, and the positions that matter for the team, et cetera? So let me start with this question for you, Ron. NFL fans, they go crazy, right, with these hot takes after the draft. Tell us a little bit about your process. I think you already did that. But how do you weigh and assess the effect of a draft? Huge question, but just give us a little insight into your process.
Yeah. And the NFL, you're right. For example, when the schedule comes out, which today is the 9th, by the 25th of May, I have nothing else I need to do for the NFL until the 20th of August. Nothing is going to change other than maybe there's 10 profile players, 3 of them edge rushers that are without NFL contracts right now. But how long does it take to know that if somebody signed, it'll take me 2 seconds to figure that out? There's not a whole a boatload of information that's going to come in between now and then. That and injuries, and if there are holdouts, but there's generally no holdouts anymore. There's nothing else to do. So I'm free to go about doing my college preparations, which always starts when they do the fireworks on July 4th. So for me, it's really from March 1st, March, April, May are my preparation months for the NFL. Like we've said already, we've already set the table in terms of, I've done the exit reports on the NFL. I know what the team needs are. They know what the team needs are. Now I look at the draft, and as I'm going through and I'm writing up the draft, and I'll have 2 draft pages on each team for the recap, 64 pages in all. I will assess whether or not, this team had a tremendous cornerback need, but they didn't draft any cornerbacks. What happened there? Cornerbacks are essential positions and stuff like that. Atlanta goes out, okay, this is the 33rd year in a row that they haven't drafted an edge rusher. Okay, well, I guess we see things differently. That's why I'll keep fading them. But they did draft, the best running back by far in Bijan Robinson. We know already, it's built in, that Atlanta is going to continue to run the ball. What we don't know about Baltimore, and I want to talk about them later, is whether or not they're going to switch gears and start passing the ball, because they may have made a philosophical change. Last year, the Eagles, in the middle of the year with the first-year head coach, before their bye week, had run the ball an average of 1 out of every 3 plays. It was now, if you look back, you say, well, that's not Philadelphia at all. Philadelphia runs the ball 2 out of every 3 plays. They're one of the most heavy running teams with the quarterback, with a rotation at running back and so on. But we learned after the bye week that the run-pass ratio changed. They flipped the switch. So part of my preparation, I think a big part of everybody's preparation should be not just who the head coach is, but what were the coordinator changes. The Chargers made a change at special teams coordinator and all of a sudden became relevant. Bill Belichick, long known for his special team prowess, they finished dead last in special team rankings in 2022. He sent 4 special team coaches to various pro days this year in order to right that fact. Now, this is the kind of work that I do. I need to know that he sent those special team coaches. Nobody else cares or even understands that. But I know this is a big thing for Bill Belichick. And I'm looking at his draft as to, did he draft special team players? Arizona, we know they're thinking about 2024, not 2023. So they're approaching the draft a little differently. So these are the kinds of things that I'm looking at. Did they address the needs? What's their overall... Can I get into their mindset? If they have a young quarterback, and half the teams have young quarterbacks right now, because that's the nature of the game these days. The most important things for me, with a team with a young quarterback, is what's their offensive line look like? What's their tight end room look like? Because if you don't have that extra target at tight end, that bigger guy, because the throws are going to be late, they're going to be off platform. Whether you're Peyton Manning, Troy Aikman, or anybody in the first year of their NFL lives, they're going to throw a lot of interceptions. You need bigger targets. That's what I need to know with the young teams. So I'm looking at all of this, and then I'm meshing it all together and arriving at a conclusion, which will be arrived at in about a week to 10 days.
Yeah. Okay. So let me ask you about one of those sources. You're talking about Bill Belichick going around looking for special teams help. Are you reading because if you like Google, right, Patriots post draft, grades or whatever, what you mostly get are like airbrushed, superficial, like these are the grades, this is who they added, this could be good. I mean, there's some good content out there, but are you reading like local, local news? Like, how do you get into the weeds? Because I feel like your research is a little different.
There's a site called Sports Spider. SPORTH, SPYDER, and you click on an NFL team and you get daily 40 different stories on a team. And so what's going, and they're going to say, so-and-so went to pro day, or this is the 5 things that we need to, that are important about the cornerback position, or right after the draft, they say these are some of the tidbits as far as why did they draft this guy from Kennesaw State in the 7th round, that kind of thing. And so those are some of the sources I'm going. And then I'm trying to go behind the weeds and find out, because unless you're the Pittsburgh Steelers, the only team in the history of the NFL that publicizes everything, which I generally send them a thank you note every year because it makes my job easier. But, like the Chargers live a few miles from my house. Their stadium's a few miles from my house, and I can't get anything out of them. I don't know anything what they're doing, and I have to dig deep. I want to know who. I don't only want to know what players they've worked out privately before the draft. I want to know how intent they like. Did they look at 10 cornerbacks and 1 safety and 1 defensive lineman, or did they look at 3rd round cornerbacks? Did they look at 7th round cornerbacks? I want to know everything there is to know about this team. And their draft philosophy. Some of it hurts my head because I'm not going to mind meld with Jerry Jones, but I am going to try to mind meld with the other teams to get at their philosophy.
Yes. I love that, because one of the edges that I found just in week to week betting in the NFL, daily betting in the NFL and the NBA is our articles like that, just like local news sources. You can, especially like right now in the NBA playoffs, of course it's not black, like it's not black and white, it's not gold every time, but you can get a pretty good idea for the way the coaches are approaching the next game and how they're going to game plan some changes, right? They'll talk about increase in pace. Doesn't always amount to an over, but things like that. I do think that handicappers should incorporate more local news, or more like sites that aren't, not the big guys, right? Like not the Bleacher Reports, certainly not the ESPNs. Look a little bit more in the weeds at the local guys, the small town guys who are obsessed with their teams, so they can really report about a lot of the nuances. Okay, now
I want to add something there, because some of these local little reporters, they gain trust in the locker room, and some of these guys will tell more to the smaller people than they will the larger.
100%, 100%, yes. Which is, and even in college sports, I see that a lot, right? These like local reporters are absolutely obsessed with their college teams. So, so they know things that no normal reporter should know, but they just do. Okay, now I know, I always say this on this podcast, and when I'm pretty sure I had you on before, Ron. I don't know why I can't jar my memory there, but we're probably going to go over 30 minutes. I like to keep my podcast closer to 30 minutes, but I know you have a lot to share. So as I ask these, use all the time you want. Which teams impressed you most? You don't have to say the New York Giants, just because I'm a fan, Ron. What teams impressed you most in the NFL draft, and why?
Okay, well, the good thing is some teams are always at the bottom, some are always at the top, but we saw some new teams last year, and there are a couple of new teams, or at least one new team this year, and it's definitely the Pittsburgh Steelers. This is a team that forever has had good focus, but their draft grades, other than at wide receiver, which they excel in, have never matched my draft grades. They just can't draft the right cornerback, or they can't draft the right offensive lineman, and it takes them much longer to develop. Well, not this year. They blindsided the New York Jets to go leapfrog over them to get the offensive tackle, the last offensive tackle that was worthy of a top 20 selection. They needed offensive line and cornerback. They read the market correctly. Joey Porter was pretty much mocked to them by half the draft experts, and he ended up going there. He just ended up going there at the top of the 2nd round. So they get the cornerback and the offensive lineman. They get a draft dropping tight end, and tight ends are so important in the NFL. We could do a whole show on that, but and the guy they got, he stuck behind Brock Bowers at Georgia. Well, nobody's going to get touches over Brock Bowers at Georgia, because he would have been the number 1 tight end coming out of this market. So he has hidden value. He's already renowned for his blocking skill, like a 6th offensive lineman. That gives that young quarterback the best of both worlds, another tight end and another blocker. So they had 2 blockers in this draft, and they've drafted and developed some over the last couple of years, free agents. That plus a nose tackle, and Pittsburgh's always been better when they clog the middle of the field, and another cornerback later on. I just thought they killed the draft. And then I'll go with Seattle as the second one. Seattle's not used to drafting this low, but thanks to the Russell Wilson trade, they got the 5th or 6th pick this year, and they got the 9th pick last year, and boy, they haven't looked back. What did they do? They took potentially the best wide receiver out there, the Ohio State guy, and so now they've got a wide receiver room that is similar to Cincinnati's in terms of going 3 deep and going 3 guys who could legitimately be low number 1s or high number 2s on any other team. And their first draft pick, again, stunning the Lions in this case, they took the best cornerback on the board in a very important position in the NFL. And we all know with the Legion of Doom what Seattle did in the secondary of, a decade ago, and they're trying to replicate that, and they got a really big jump start on that. I will throw a bone to your Giants real quickly, because this is a pet peeve of mine. That trade value chart, I would rip it up and shred it into 18 different pieces, because to the naive person that says, 23 versus 36 versus whatever, that doesn't mean a thing to me, because it's how your team values the draft. For example, with the Giants, they took Banks at quarterback and they traded up to get him, and they traded a draft pick to get him. They took Banks at 24, but Banks was not the 24th best person in the draft. He was more like 15 to 18. Hyatt, who they took, and we know that the Giants have a number of wide receivers, 10 of them or whatever, but they don't have anybody close to that one wide receiver, that go-to guy. Hyatt could be that go-to guy. They trade for him. They give up something to get to 73, but Hyatt is legitimately, in my draft, he's a 45. He's middle of the second round. So if you looked at the trade and you said, well, you didn't trade 97 and 130 or whatever for 73, but you traded it for 45, wouldn't you feel better about the draft? That's where I say, maybe the Giants didn't hit the draft from top to bottom, but they blew away the trade value chart because the players they traded for had higher value than when they were receiving. They knew it was time to get them.
Yeah, I love the Giants draft. I think, normally seasons past, I'm scratching my head over and over again, like, especially when we saw obviously needed offensive linemen and things like that. But the Giants are finally filling their needs, which is interesting, because I know fan bases have a lot to say about team needs, and they could be very bullish, but fans have been pretty spot on about the Giants for years, and it hasn't been happening. Now it's finally happening. Which is really nice. Let me ask you about 2 players. I think Michael Mayer, who went to the Raiders, tight end at Notre Dame. I'm a Notre Dame fan, so I watched that dude. He's an absolute. He would keep some of their drives alive single-handedly, which is his physicality, the way that he catches the ball. I don't love that he's in Vegas, but do you think that he's going to be a difference maker for them? Because I think that he has a tremendous upside. Am I on the right track? Do you have him graded pretty high?
Yeah, I had him graded as tight end 1. So it was close between him and Kincaid, and I had him in the first round. This is philosophically like you take Indianapolis versus you take the Chargers, for example. Indianapolis, their whole draft, this is another thing I did. I listened to GM Ballard's whole press conference. So what he said is that he loves the potential of all these guys, starting right away with Anthony Richardson.
Yeah.
And then you take the Chargers, who's every one of those guys, their GM, one of the driest post-draft conferences I've ever heard, but I made my way through it. He basically said every one of these guys produced on the field. And people spend a little too much time watching these people in shorts. I love the combine, and I love to see what they do in the drills and the hands and their turning radius and stuff like that. But if you go back to Meyer's tape, go back to what he did on the field. Yes, he didn't run 4.5, but everybody knew the ball was coming to him, and he averaged 5 receptions a game. No, this is a guy who's going to do what he needs to do. It's an upgrade over where Waller was physically when he left the team and went to the Giants. The Giants hope they certainly get somebody who's in better health. But this was a great move for the Raiders, and I endorse it.
I love it. Okay, how about, were you so as like shocked and disappointed by the Lions taking Gibbs as everybody else? Everyone's like, "What are they doing?" I mean, if you looked at that draft room, right? They're like all like, "Let's go." What did you think about that pick?
I don't think you have enough time in the day to talk about the Lions
Yeah,
because I like to mix humor in my report.
yeah,
So I go way back. So I'm gonna quote the Supremes a whole bunch of times in my report. Upside Down is one of their songs.
yeah,
Reflections is one of their songs. I mean, there's so much going on. The bottom line is, on the one hand, the Lions drafted positions that don't move the win needle. The best running backs in history barely made it into the playoffs. O.J. Simpson, Barry Sanders, and so on. If you have an Emmett Smith, you also have Troy Aikman, and you have a Michael Irvin, and you have a defense and stuff like that. But on the other hand, they drafted 5 starters. So how do you fault them on that? So it's kind of a give and take. And they also drafted players that fit Dan Campbell. I mean, every one of them is a Dan Campbell player. And if you have locker room chemistry, and that's what changed the Bengals, in my opinion, locker room chemistry developed. It wasn't that thug mentality of a
yeah,
decade ago. And I think what Detroit is doing is building their culture, and it kind of works. Would I like to see them draft more traditional positions because their statistical defense wasn't as great as it needed to be? Sure. Gibbs is a stand-up guy, and he's a really, really good running back, and he did carry a first-round grade, and he did vault me to a plus 350 prop that 2 running backs would be drafted in the first round. So I have nothing but love for Gibbs,
yeah,
and I think he'll help the team. And they have a set offensive line, so I'm okay with that and so on. But I do think at some point they could have had Gibbs at 12. They could have had Campbell at 35 without a problem, because Campbell wasn't even considered the best linebacker off the board, and Gibbs was considered at the first spot he was going to go was Tampa at 19, and he was going to be gone by Cincinnati at 28. So they misused draft value, but they still got really good players.
yeah. I really love what you said. I think it's really sharp because I agree with you. Right, the Lions are going after a certain archetype of
Mhm.
character, and like the 2 decades of dominance from the Bill Belichick, Patriots. eh, He wasn't really known for brilliant drafts.
No.
I don't think the reason why the Patriots were dominant is because of that. But he was, Bill Belichick and the GM. They were on the same page as bringing in the same type of dude onto their team. A try hard, high character type of individual. And if you didn't fit the scheme, then you were, fit the culture, then you're out of there. And it
Yeah.
does seem like that's something that Dan Campbell's doing. And I do tend to think that that works more often than it doesn't. Like,
Yeah.
of course, you don't want to pass on obvious talent if it can really help your team. But I don't have a problem with the players they picked. Some of the positions that they picked them in are questionable, right? But
Yeah.
I agree with you. I don't was it a head scratcher a little bit? Sure, but I think ultimately Dan Campbell is building something there, and we saw the results. I mean, let's not forget, right? I think I said this to you when we talked about when we did your exit reports, but those Lions knocked off the Packers in the final game of the season. Packers could have made the playoffs. That's a sign of a team with nothing to play for. That's a team to play on next year, of course, as long as they stay healthy and everything else. Okay, so give me some teams that really left you scratching your head, like what is this team doing? I don't think they improved necessarily at all.
Okay. Well, you want some controversy, right? So, I mean, we got to mix it up here a little bit. So,
Yeah,
for the audience and so on. But I have a huge problem. I understand this team is good. They have a really good quarterback. They are building a culture. They went to the playoffs last year. They did all these things. But I cannot understate how inept Trent Baalke is as a Jacksonville GM. He proved it in San Francisco. He's proven it here. I told you, I opined, 15 minutes ago or so on this great 2022 draft. And I took 2 quotes that he had during that 2022 draft, and I used it in last year's report when he turned 12 picks into 7 in the deepest draft ever. He basically said the draft pretty much the talent dropped off after the 5th round. That was one of his quotes. And he called the wide receiver group of 2022 thin and completely gone by the middle of the 5th round. And those two statements were like he was an alien to the planet or something like that. And how do you take 12 picks and make them 7 in such a deep draft when Jacksonville was, admittingly, they were going to get better just because Urban Meyer was not in the building. Yeah. And they had Trevor Lawrence and they had a really good coach who'd been there and done that and was a pro's pro. All he had to do was get them better players. And I know Jacksonville is ascending, but this is the AFC, and every single team in that league is built to win the Super Bowl, it seems. I mean, the AFC is so top heavy that one player or two players make a difference. And in this 13-player draft, and there are only 235 or so rateable players this year. So every team's going to have a couple of players that I rate NR, not draft worthy. But they broke the record. They have 7 out of their 13 picks are rated not draft worthy. And that's a problem I have with them. So yes, they're a good team. Yes, they're probably going to win the division. Yes, everybody's going to say, wait a second, Ron, they won 10 games. What are you talking about? I'm just saying that they're going to miss out on their ultimate goals because they've blown draft after draft after draft, leaving talent on the table. And any other team I talk about is going to pale in comparison to what I say about them. But I don't like what Dallas did, because they keep going for complementary talent instead of, and they drafted the tight end that should have been drafted in the 4th round. They met their needs, but they didn't really, they would just, every pick should have been kind of a round later for them. And then everybody knows what they're going to do. Buffalo kind of hinted that, hey, we knew they were going to look at Kincaid as a tight end. Philadelphia leapfrogged them the year before. It's like everybody knows what they're going to do. They just sit around. And I think the other two teams that I'm a little scared about, and they had good years, the Giants needed to improve just to stay the same because it was smoke and mirrors last year. Well, the same was true with Minnie. I mean, Minnie won every close game, 11-0 in close games. And Minnie kind of went sideways in this draft, whereas the Giants improved. And then I didn't kind of like what San Francisco did in terms of where they were. They just not a lot of productivity. So those were the teams that bothered me.
Yeah, of any team that could spare a little, maybe not quite as efficient in the way that they approach the draft with their depth, it probably is the 49ers.
Yeah.
But that, I mean, I guess not a quarterback, but, we'll see what happens there. All it takes is one injury there or something. But, yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, especially with the Jaguars, because you talk about opportunity, right? Like they have such a great opportunity in their division this year. Even a team like the Titans that have been, perennial challenger in the least. I mean, they didn't, do what they usually do last season, but they gave it their all. And right towards the end, they were fighting hard. You got an opportunity here to get to the next level, right? And if they really didn't grab that brass ring at the NFL draft. And it's interesting too, right? Because I do think that some head coaches and GMs, closer relationships, more, symbiotic visions and everything, but maybe not the case at Jacksonville. I'm not sure. I mean, the Cowboys, right? You look at that, even looking at their draft room, Ron, like it looks immaculate, right? There's like a big screen behind them and everything, but it just looks like pressure. It's always a pressure cooker there in Dallas. So some of the decision making, it doesn't surprise me, right? That it just they're kind of all over the place. And I hate it when teams are talking too much. So like the Jets have done that. The Jets have told everybody for months that they want Aaron Rodgers to bring him over. Save some of these sentiments so that you have some leveraging power. When
it costs them. It costs them because part of the deal was moving from 13 to 15 in the draft, and that subtle move cost them an offensive lineman.
Unbelievable. Ron, I mean, clearly, imagine if we went over every NFL team on this show. You would be here for a very long time, and I'm not going to keep you that long. But my first question is something about your brand and something you do, because I know you do it as well as anyone in the industry. This season preview where you write and evaluate all these teams, this is purchasable, right?
Well, I've only given it to a handful of people. and some friends and whatever. I haven't marketed it. I probably either should market it or, maybe I'll make it available and somebody could PayPal me or whatever. It's kind of valuable information. I admit it. I mean, 64 pages, and people may disagree. No, you're wrong about the Bears. No, you're wrong about this and that. But, no one's right about every team, and no one can foresee the injuries that come or a bad break or something. But I'll consider making it marketable. Let's put it that way.
I told you I was going to be transparent. I put you on the spot there, but I think you should consider it because I know there's going to be nuances in there that are going to sound different, give readers more of an edge than most, especially because nowadays everybody's doing an NFL preview, right? Oh, this is my preview package and everything. They're just not all built the same. Before I let you go, because we've obviously went way over 30 minutes. That's what I do with Ron. I can't keep it.
I'm sorry.
No, I love it. I love it, Ron. I want to talk about these NFL teams next season, and I know you're not one to have any hot takes, but is there any team, the way they're structured, composed, the schedule that's ahead of them, that's at least standing out to you right now? Like this team, you just have a feeling, based on your research, obviously, too, that they could have a really strong year that maybe not everybody sees coming.
Really strong year. Well, I mean, there's a couple of cases I thought Green Bay would be in rebuild mode, and now I'm not so sure anymore. They gave Love, we talk about the Lions, who are deserved favorites in that division, but I'd be scared a little bit. I think as down as I was on the Bears, and believe me, I was down on the Bears last year, I think they could be sneaky good this year. They've done a lot of different things. Green Bay is not falling as far as we thought because Jordan Love is either ready or he's not ready. And he's had all this time to correct some bad habits. And I think it's wonderful when a quarterback sits like that. And then he gets an offensive line. And then they go out and draft 2 tight ends, just like I said, young quarterback, 2 tight ends. And then Minnesota, as much as they weren't a 13-win team last year, it doesn't mean that they're a 6-win team. Right. They still have one of the more experienced NFC quarterbacks that there is out there in Kirk Cousins, accurate and so on. They still have some really good players, the best wide receiver. So that division is going to be really contentious. And so I think it's not a walk in the park for a team like Detroit. It's not going to be a walk in the park for a team like Buffalo, believe it or not, because Miami, a draft of 4, we can't talk about that very much. But, let's face it, Miami did all their work in free agency. They got, I don't know if it's possible, but they got faster. So, I mean, it's just crazy. So they've got weapons. The only question I would have about Tua, I wouldn't throw money at Miami because I don't know I don't know if Tua is going to retire in the 9th week or is going to be in the MVP conversation in the 9th week. I mean, that's the mystique. What's the mystique of Baltimore? 2 years ago, they tried to say, we're going to pass the ball. Last year, they said, no, we're not drafting any wide receivers. We're just doing tight ends. You stop us at what we do best. Now they go out and get a new offensive coordinator. Again, this offensive coordinator move is a subtle move because he knows his stuff, Todd Monken. And now they go out and get 3 new wide receivers, essentially, because Bateman didn't play last year. And then they got Zay Flowers, and then they have Odell Beckham. Are they going to stay committed to it when things get tough? I don't think Lamar Jackson's throwing for 6,000 yards, but if he throws for 3,500, it would be a record for him. So these are the teams that are kind of interesting to me. And I'll give you an off-the-radar team. Sean Payton's in Denver. It's not you look at the defensive coaches and they haven't done as well lately, the Tampas, the New Orleans and so on. But Sean Payton's in Denver. Russell Wilson is young by quarterback standards these days. He's going to take teaching from a Sean Payton better than he did from a defensive guy. They still have a lot of weapons offensively. Why are we sleeping on Denver now? Because this could be something, just under the radar. This is a team that intrigues me.
I love that they are kind of under the radar too. It feels like that. And maybe come July, they won't be, right? Maybe everyone's going to talk about Russell Wilson and he's going to be cringy again and Sean Payton and all that stuff. But yeah, I only see improvement. I mean, it would be hard for them not to improve. after what we saw last season.
Yeah.
But like I think we talked about this too on your exit report show. There's an adult in the room now, right?
Yeah.
And sure there was before, sort of, but Hackett, it's his first gig. Like he really didn't. It
Yeah.
really wasn't set up for success there. I think Russell is actually going to listen to Sean Payton, and that's a huge part of all this. I just wanted to say really quick too about two things you said. Odell Beckham Jr. to the Ravens, I think, is a big addition because as somebody who's watched him closely since he was with the Giants, at least I could say this about Odell: he brings drama, but he's a gamer, right? Like he's a
Mm-hmm.
competitor, and they really don't have. They've had some talent on offense, of course, but they don't have that guy that's going to like rally behind Lamar and kind of get him up and get him going, a leader on the field. OBJ is that. He can help with
Mm-hmm.
that. I mean, look at the way that he played in the Super Bowl with the Rams before he got injured. He was on track to get like 12 catches in that game.
Yeah.
So he's going to come out hot, I think. We'll see how I mean, virtually 2 years off. Well, I guess a full season off. We'll see what happens. And then you can tell I could talk to Ron forever, but Jordan Love, what I saw is confidence. He wasn't pausing anymore, right? Like he was
Mm-hmm.
making his reads, letting it go. You go with God a little bit. Whereas you saw him in the past, everything was hesitant. Everything was
Yeah.
overly cautious. He set up well there in Green Bay. Agree with
Yeah.
you. I think they're going to be maybe even feistier in a sense because it was always Aaron Rodgers' team. What's Aaron Rodgers thinking and doing? Now they can kind of maybe come together a little bit under this young stud and see how he does. And he doesn't need to, be perfect. They still have a really talented roster. So I
Yeah.
can't wait to see what happens in the NFC North. I think it's going to be really interesting, Ron.
Yeah. I
But yeah,
agree with
all
both of
this and
those.
more. And I appreciate the kind words about my Giants. Maybe there's a chance that my Giants
Yeah.
are pretty competitive
It's
again
one of
this
those
year.
things you have to get better to stay the same kind of thing. If they want to
Yeah.
make the playoffs again, they can't rely on the fact that they snuck up on teams, that they outcoached teams and stuff like that. Now you got to back it up with talent. And I think they did improve.
Yeah, I sure hope so, Ron. Ron, always a pleasure to talk to you. We were talking before the show, and I want to hold true to it too. I'd love to collaborate with you more before the season, during the season, anything we can do. I think you're one of the sharpest minds out there when it comes to NFL betting, and just the NFL in general and these teams. So thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me. And it is likewise always a pleasure to talk and brainstorm with you.